Beneath years of love and trust, I uncovered a secret that shattered my world. The woman I vowed to cherish hid a life I never imagined. What started as suspicion turned into a calculated plan to reclaim control and justice. This is my story, raw, painful, and finally unveiled. I want to share my story with you. It starts on a cool autumn morning when drowsy light spills across our master bedroom, slanting through the white curtains onto the plush carpet. For 12 years, we built this life together brick by brick. Early in our marriage, I poured everything into our home and my career, believing we were constructing a foundation of mutual trust and infinite possibility. She greeted me every day with that warm smile I once thought was proof of our unshakable bond. I gave her everything I had: weekend getaways, indulgent surprise gifts, even sacrifices at work so I could attend her office parties or help her mother with the garden. In return, I was rewarded with mornings spent drinking coffee at the kitchen counter and evenings cuddled on the couch while we watched crime dramas. There was laughter, effortless conversation, and a shared belief that we were invincible. It was perfect, or so I believed. We kept up with the neighbors, hosting barbecues that brought our cul-de-sac to life every summer. Our children chased frisbees around the yard. I worked hard so she could pursue her own ambitions, and whenever she spoke of her plans, that promotion, that long overdue trip to Italy, I was her greatest supporter. I celebrated her achievements as if they were my own, and she reciprocated by attending my conferences and telling our friends how dedicated I was. We were the ideal couple in the perfectly manicured suburbs. My colleagues would often remark that I seemed the happiest man on earth. I told them all I had become, who I was supposed to be: a devoted husband, a reliable provider, and the kind of secure partner any woman would dream of having. Our marriage grew comfortable to the point of being ordinary. We shared responsibilities without complaint. She'd drop off the dry cleaning while I picked up groceries. She'd handle the family calendar while I managed the bills. Everything ran like clockwork. I never questioned the gentle routine, because when you're in love, routine feels like stability. I thought love meant easy predictability, so I stoked the fires of our little domestic universe with romantic dinners at home and spontaneous drives to the beach. We never fought about money or trust or where our relationship was going, because I believed we were always going somewhere together. I was happy to be the quiet anchor beneath her brilliance, content to stand in the background and watch her shine. Friends would send pictures after our annual holiday gatherings. In each photo, I see her beaming beside me, her arm wrapped around my shoulders. We sang carols at Christmas, toasted champagne at New Year's, and packed the kids into matching pajamas on Easter. I'd watch her in those moments, running her fingers through my hair or telling the kids what a wonderful father I was. I felt invincible. I was building a fortress of shared memories and unbreakable promises. At work, I saved every bonus I could to renovate our master bathroom. I installed new hardwood floors in the living room. She told me she couldn't believe how lucky she was to have someone who cared so much. I believed her fully and completely. No alarm bells rang in my head. There were no suspicious phone calls or whispered conversations in another room. There were no unexplained charges on our credit card or late nights at the office that I didn't know about. She came home, kissed me on the cheek, asked how my day went, and gave me that look, the same look she'd given me since our first date, one that said she was mine and no one else's. Our marriage was a seamless mosaic of trust, respect, and quiet affection. I was blissfully unaware that she had already plotted her departure from our little world. To me, our love was as steady as the heart beating in my chest, and I never thought for a second that this picture of stability could conceal a house of cards waiting to collapse. It began with small oddities that I almost missed because I trusted her without question. She started spending more evenings working late in the study. I'd find her laptop open on the desk, a half-empty wine glass beside it, but no papers or folders related to her job. When I asked what project she was tackling, she'd wave me away with a breezy excuse about a new hobby she'd taken up online. A digital photography course she claimed kept her creative and relaxed. I nodded, smiled, and told her to enjoy herself, convinced that any outlet for stress was a healthy thing. In hindsight, I see how carefully she pitched her lie, softening the edges so I'd barely feel them. Her phone became a fortress. She started charging it in her purse on the counter, then whisking it away into the bedroom. Notifications appeared when I wasn't in the room, a soft buzz that ended abruptly when she slipped the device into her pocket. Curiosity prickled at me, but I shoved it aside, telling myself that privacy was a reasonable demand. She'd stiffen if I asked to see her screen. Instead, she'd pat my arm, mutter words about trust, and insist I needed to ease up. I believed her, though I could not explain the hollow feeling it left in my chest. Soon she introduced a new work friend named Vanessa. She arrived unannounced twice for dinner, smiling and polite, but I noticed how my wife looked at her when she thought I wasn't paying attention, a look too warm for mere collegial affection. They took the same yoga class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or so I was told, and sometimes they went for coffee afterward. The pattern grew predictable. Tuesday at 6, she'd slip out with an excuse about traffic. Thursday at 8, she'd whisper goodnight and tell me not to wait up. My heart stuttered one evening when I found a receipt for a boutique cafe tucked between the yoga studio card and our daughter's drawing. The time didn't match any class schedule, but I swallowed the knot in my throat and pretended not to see it. I started noticing little lies that didn't add up. She said her overtime report was submitted on Friday, but the spreadsheet timestamp was Saturday morning. Her keycard log said she left work at 6, but she walked through our door at 9. I questioned my own instincts like a scientist doubting a surprising result. Was I truly witnessing deception, or was I just projecting fears onto her harmless routines? She caught me watching her one night when she thought I was asleep. She looked at me with such wounded surprise that I felt ashamed of my suspicions. I mumbled an apology and slid into the covers as if nothing had happened, though my mind raced until dawn. Despite the growing tension, I continued the act of normalcy. I bought her favorite jasmine tea, booked a couple's massage for her birthday, and surprised her with that painting she admired months ago. Each gesture made my throat burn with emotion, love, bitterness, guilt. I felt like a man walking a tightrope, certain that one careless word would send me plunging into madness or ruin. I forced a laugh when she told me about a silly joke Vanessa shared. I filled the dishwasher and kissed her goodnight, as if the pattern of deceit didn't stretch across every smile. Beneath the surface, I began to collect breadcrumbs. I kept a private log in the Notes app on my phone, dates, times, snippets of overheard conversations that made no sense. I photographed every odd receipt I discovered, quietly transferred funds from our joint account when she wasn't looking, and set up an old email address in my name to track online activity. Each new piece of evidence felt like a loose thread in a vast tapestry of lies. I told myself I was patient, rational, that I'd rather know the truth than live in blissful ignorance. I reminded myself that every empire built on deceit would collapse, and I was merely waiting for the moment to tug at the first thread so the whole thing would come undone. Late at night, I sat in my office chair and stared at the glow of my phone, reading through the log entries I'd typed in the dark. The soft click of text timestamps echoed like a distant heartbeat. I felt both terrified and electrified by the path I had chosen, knowing that my suspicion had hardened into a resolution. She was dancing on a line I would soon redraw in bloodless ink, and I was no longer the complacent husband. I was the patient strategist, watching her every move, assembling a plan of quiet dismantling from the inside out. And when the time came, there would be no escape. She left her laptop open one morning, the screen glowing with the remnants of last night's work, and I saw it before I could stop myself. The subject line blinked in bold letters, "You are my home." My heart lurched as I clicked the email icon, and there it was, thread after thread of messages between her and the other man. They spoke in intimate confessions, sharing secrets deeper than anything we ever exchanged. He wrote about the way her eyes softened when she smiled, how her laughter sounded like music when it escaped in the early hours. She replied that he understood her in ways I never had, that he was the safe harbor she needed. I sank into the chair, breath shallow, as I scrolled through a year's worth of betrayals hidden behind sterile timestamps. June of last year, "I miss you so much it hurts," she'd written. October, "Every time I walk past our wedding photos I feel nothing." December, "Your hand on my back gives me shivers I've never felt with him." The messages grew more desperate, the language more raw than any I had ever used to speak to her. They planned stolen weekends together, discussed future escapes, even joked about how easy it would be to vanish without a trace. My vision blurred with tears, but I pressed on. There were photos too, her profile picture laughing with him at a seaside cafe, a mirror selfie taken in a hotel room with soft morning light spilling across the bed. The tag said Florence, Paris, Barcelona, destinations I believed we'd visit together someday. I realized then that the vacations I planned, the anniversary dinners I scheduled, meant nothing to her. She'd been living two lives and mine was the hollow one. I felt the walls closing in. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, each second a hammer blow. I wanted to confront her, to shout every accusation and fling every question at her feet, but a calm voice in my head whispered patience. I forced myself to minimize the email window, to clear my browser history, as if pretending I'd never seen the proof could preserve the shred of dignity left in our marriage. Instead, I copied everything, every word, every photograph, and saved it to an encrypted folder on my private drive. In that moment, I wasn't just a husband betrayed. I was a man whose life had been orchestrated by someone else. The shock rippled through me, a wave of anger so intense I thought my chest would explode. My wife was a stranger. The woman I'd trusted with my dreams had traded me for someone who made her feel alive. Their emotional bond was stronger, deeper, more intoxicating than any moment we'd shared in 12 years. I closed the laptop and stood up, shaking. The house felt oppressively quiet. I walked through each room, our bedroom, the living room with the family photos, her closet with its neat rows of dresses, and saw ghosts of the life we once lived. I touched the framed wedding portrait on the mantel and felt bile rise in my throat. How had I missed every sign, every late-night text, every secretive grin, every unexplained expense? They had built their relationship on stolen moments, but I had built mine on blind faith. In the study, I found a small leather-bound journal I didn't recognize. Inside, her neat handwriting spilled over page after page of thoughts and confessions. How tired she felt of pretending, how guilty she was to hurt me, how desperately she longed for something real. Every entry confirmed the affair was no casual fling. It was a soul-deep connection that eclipsed our marriage. She even wrote about me, describing her sense of duty and gratitude, but lamenting the emptiness that crept in when she looked at my face. My mind raced, divorce loomed, financial ruin loomed, public humiliation loomed. And yet beneath the rage, beneath the grief, I felt the first stirrings of cold resolve. She had underestimated me, believing my love blinded me to everything. She thought I would never fight, never notice, or if I did, that I would crumble in silence. How wrong she was. I shut the laptop one last time, backpacking the encrypted folder into a hidden partition no one could find. I lined up a fresh page in my notebook and wrote 2 words in bold letters, long con. This was no longer about heartbreak, it was about justice. She had drawn the first blood with her betrayal. Now she would feel every inch of the unraveling I had meticulously planned. And when the world watched her crumble, I would stand back, patient and unbroken, the architect of her downfall. That night I lay awake in the darkness, my heart pounding like a war drum against the silence. Every thought returned to those messages, the photos, the journal entries that tore our life apart in cold, cruel clarity. I could taste the bitter edge of betrayal on my tongue. I wanted to scream, to weep, to burn everything down in one furious act of rage. But beneath the heat of anger, something colder and sharper took shape, a resolution honed by pain into something dangerous. I would not be her victim. I would not seal my own fate with tears and confrontation. Instead, I would become the perfect pawn in her game while secretly becoming its master. By dawn, exhaustion weighed on me like a shroud, but the plan was already unfolding in my mind. I would play the part she expected, the devoted husband full of love and gratitude, oblivious to her deceit. She believed my heart was soft and accommodating, a battered place easily won back with a smile. She would never see the real me hiding behind that smile. In the dim light of morning, I rose quietly, careful not to disturb her peaceful slumber. I watched her chest rise and fall with the steady rhythm of someone who still trusted me completely. Pain clenched my chest, but I forced myself to breathe deeply, to steady the tremor in my hands. I moved into the kitchen and began making breakfast exactly as she liked it. 2 eggs over easy, English muffins toasted just so, crisp bacon, and a pot of strong coffee brewed until it steamed. I measured each ingredient with the precision of a chemist mixing a volatile formula. Every movement was deliberate, designed to reassure her that nothing had changed between us. When the plates were ready, I carried them into the dining room and laid them out side by side. A fresh rose from the garden sat in a small vase, and I folded her napkin into the shape of a heart, the same detail she used to adore. My mind catalogued each gesture, knowing it would feed her sense of security and lull her deeper into complacency. She wandered downstairs in her silk robe, hair still tousled from sleep, and smiled when she saw me. Her eyes lit up with genuine happiness, completely unaware that the man before her was a stranger wearing her husband's face. She slid into the chair, closed her eyes, inhaled the scent of coffee, and I felt a sharp pang of envy for her ignorance. I handed her a plate and poured her cup, watching the steam dance between us. "Morning, sweetheart," I said softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. My voice was calm, warm, the same tone I'd used to soothe her fears a dozen times over. She looked at me and laughed, a light, carefree sound that should have filled me with joy but instead twisted something inside me. We ate in companionable silence, broken only by polite conversation about the weather and the mundane details of the day ahead. She told me she had a yoga class mid-morning and a lunch meeting with Vanessa, her work friend, and I nodded, asking her to have fun. I suggested she try the new cafe down the street. She smiled and kissed me lightly on the cheek before gathering her things. As she closed the door behind her, I watched her walk away, holding my hand out as if to offer comfort. But the hand she turned to leave behind was empty of warmth. My mask remained in place, flawless. I cleaned the dishes with measured movements, my heart a quiet storm of calculation. Alone again, I slipped into the study and opened my private folder. Inside lay the evidence I had collected: emails, photos, journal excerpts, bank statements showing her stolen funds. I glanced at the list of names I had falsified in a covert investment account. My smile bent toward something dark and inevitable as I checked and rechecked the numbers. By nightfall, her assets would be tied up in a corporate shell we both controlled, but only I could access. She would wake to find her credit cards frozen, her bank accounts restricted, and little clue as to how it had happened. Her fury would be directed at the world, at me, her supposedly clueless husband, because she would never suspect the quiet architect of her downfall stood beside her every morning, wearing the perfect mask of loving devotion. I closed the folder and shut off my laptop. The house was still, the sun streaming through the windows like a spotlight on my resolution. The long con had begun, and with each small act of kindness I performed over the coming days, I would tighten the web around her until there was no escape. She believed she had fooled me, but the truth was I'd known all along. Every smile she sent my way, every whispered thank you, would lead her one step closer to the trap I'd spent months setting in the shadows. And when the moment came to reveal the full scope of her betrayal, it would be in public, in a place where humiliation would cut deeper than divorce. I would stand beside her, still wearing my mask, and watch her world collapse from the inside out, all while remaining the perfect, unsuspecting husband in everyone else's eyes. He leaned over the study desk long after dusk and flicked on his laptop, eyes glinting in the glow of the screen. This was no longer the heartbroken husband nursing fresh wounds. He was the architect of ruin, methodical and composed. First came the spyware installation. He hooked a tiny device behind the router in the utility closet, then slipped in a USB drive loaded with remote access software onto her laptop when she left it unattended. Every keystroke, every message, every file transfer would now feed directly into his hidden server. He set it all to sync overnight, knowing that by morning he'd have a complete dossier on her digital life. Locations, phone calls, secret conversations. Next, he sat back and drafted an email to a private investigator he'd chosen after discreet online searches and a few coded phone calls. The Pi had respectable reviews and a network of reliable informants in the city. He paid in cash, arranged a drop-off at a diner, and passed along only her name, a few photographs, and the dates he'd compiled from her journal entries. The investigator would track her movements, trace her lover's background, and confirm every location stamp she'd carefully deleted from Instagram. He closed the email with a single line, "Confirm when you have proof." It was all business, no emotion, no room for error. While he waited, the divorce lawyer came into play. He had chosen a specialist known for ruthless asset protection and high-profile casework. Their first meeting took place in a corner of a quiet cafe, voices low and guarded. The lawyer listed strategies: transfer funds into blind trusts, file for a temporary restraining order to freeze joint accounts, establish hidden corporate entities. He nodded and took notes, his expression polite but unyielding. "We'll move quickly," the lawyer said. "Once you have proof of misconduct, everything shifts in your favor." He slid a retainer across the table. It was a small price for the arsenal he now wielded. All the while, his days were filled with the facade of normalcy. He drove her to yoga class, chatted about a new cafe they should try, casually slipped her debit card back into her purse when she forgot it at home. Each gesture was a calculated move on the chessboard. The breakfast omelets, the surprise lunch delivery at her office, the gentle kisses on the cheek as she rushed out the door, all served a hidden purpose: to reinforce the mask of the devoted husband and keep her suspicions at bay. With each act of kindness, he buried the seeds of doubt deep beneath her trust. He planted a small gift on her desk, a sleek leather portfolio to hold her work documents, knowing she'd appreciate the thoughtfulness. Unbeknownst to her, he'd also copied the credentials from its RFID pocket, giving him access to any secure building she entered. He asked her about her day with sincere interest, praised her for juggling her career and their family, and suggested she take a weekend retreat to clear her mind. Every word was part of the plan to keep her dependent, comfortable, and unsuspecting. At night, he reviewed the spyware logs. He clicked through daily itineraries, call records, and GPS trails that showed her clandestine meetings. Even the coded messages she thought private were now laid bare. He let out a soft breath, satisfaction mingling with the cold steel of his heart. He forwarded the most incriminating screenshots to the Pi with instructions to gather physical evidence, photographs, receipts, eyewitness testimony. He closed the files and shut the laptop with a decisive click. Meanwhile, the divorce lawyer drafted a petition that would serve as the opening salvo in court: fault-based divorce citing adultery, financial misconduct, and emotional abandonment. He underlined key paragraphs where he would ask for spousal support, equitable distribution, and a full forensic audit of their finances. The lawyer assured him the evidence he was stockpiling would demolish any defense she could muster. As the sun rose the next morning, he stood in the kitchen brewing coffee with the same calm demeanor he'd perfected over months. She emerged in her yoga pants, stretched tiredly, and greeted him with a sleepy smile he couldn't betray. He handed her a mug and wrapped an arm around her waist. "Good morning, love," he said softly. In that moment his heart felt like ice, but his voice held all the warmth of a man who worshipped his wife. She took the coffee and kissed his cheek before leaving. He watched her go, savoring the flawless performance. Behind him, the shadows in the hallway concealed the invisible net he had woven around her life. Every day from here on out would be a step toward her ruin, financial collapse, public disgrace, and the shattering of her world. He would sit in court with a calm smile, the man who had been taken for granted finally emerging victorious. And she would learn too late that the most dangerous enemy is the one wearing your face. From dawn until dusk, I moved through our home like a ghost, snapping photos with a hidden camera, recording audio on a pen microphone, and organizing every scrap of evidence into a digital fortress. Each morning I downloaded the previous night's spyware logs and cross-referenced GPS pings with phone call timestamps. I watched as she slipped away from yoga class into his waiting car, then wound their route to secret rendezvous spots I'd already visited in disguise. I photographed the parking lot of the boutique hotel where they spent stolen afternoons, captured the flimsy hotel keycard she thought lost, and saved every credit card charge she'd made for two. One afternoon, as I combed through his social media profile for names and addresses, I discovered something that made my lips curl. The man she carried on with was not single. He had a wife and two children living just across town. The evidence lay in plain sight: family photos posted on a private group, birthday wishes from his in-laws, tagged images of school plays. He'd assumed invisibility in his affair. He'd never guessed I would find him. I printed out the photos, signed and timestamped them myself, and placed them in a discreet folder labeled Vanessa's husband. That evening, I donned a neutral sweater and approached the small suburban house where his family lived. His wife, Catherine, answered the door with a polite smile that dissolved when I said her name. I introduced myself coolly, offering no explanation of our connection, and handed her the envelope. Inside were pictures of her husband with my wife, receipts for expensive dinners, hotel dates. There were screenshots of messages pledging love, promises of escape, plans to start a new life together. She stood in stunned silence, the color draining from her face as tears welled in her eyes. I told her quietly that I was sorry to bring such news, but believed she deserved the truth. Her anguish was a devastating echo of my own. I left her trembling on her doorstep, the taste of retribution already sweet. Back home, I turned to our finances with clinical precision. I opened the laptop and logged into the joint account, then began redirecting funds into a network of shell corporations I controlled. I bought limited liability companies in states with strong asset protection laws, transferred our vacation savings, our investment portfolio, even the equity from our home into a newly formed trust. By the time she logged in to check her balance, she would find empty accounts, or worse, balances she could never touch without my signature. I made sure every transaction was above board by the letter of the law, burying each transfer under layers of legalese and corporate filings. All the while I maintained my mask of normalcy. I asked her about her day, pretended to worry when she mentioned deadlines at work, and offered to pick up takeout on nights she was tired. Each gesture kept her off guard, sustaining the illusion of a loving partner. When she pointed out that I was spending more time at the study desk, I shrugged and said I was working on a side project. She looked relieved and returned to her yoga sessions, never suspecting that side project was the most elaborate construction of her undoing. I stored the evidence in organized folders. One labeled Hotel Rendezvous contained photographs and reservation confirmations. Another, Financial Misconduct, held cornered bank statements and wire transfer records. The folder Catherine held the pictures of the other wife, a powerful tool for the courtroom and for the public humiliation to come. I created a hidden slideshow that combined her betrayal and his hypocrisy, planning to show it at the final reveal. Each file ended with a line noting the location and date, a physician's precision so no defense attorney could argue authenticity. With every piece of evidence cataloged and every dollar secured under my name, the noose around her life tightened invisibly. She'd wake up one day to find her financial independence evaporated and her personal life in tatters. Her lover's wife would divorce him too, securing alimony and child support while the scandal followed him through social circles. Their children would learn of their father's betrayal, their family shattered by the consequences of his affair. I leaned back in my chair and allowed myself a rare moment of satisfaction. The net was not yet fully drawn, but each strand was in place, waiting for the final tug. In every file, every transfer, every classified meeting, I'd been the unseen hand shaping their downfall. When the moment came to spring the trap, likely at the anniversary dinner I was planning, the same one she thought was a romantic gesture, it would be the culmination of months of silent work. She would realize too late that the man she'd wronged was not the simple, loving husband she took for granted, but the architect of her ruin. The banquet hall glowed with crystal chandeliers casting a warm golden light over long tables draped in ivory linens. Guests in elegant attire murmured and laughed softly, wine glasses tinkling like delicate bells. I watched from the edge of the crowd, wearing a tailored charcoal suit and a calm expression that belied the storm inside me. The anniversary dinner was supposed to be our crowning moment, 12 years of marriage celebrated in style. Instead, it would be her undoing. Rows of candles flickered down the center of each table, illuminating the carefully arranged florals I'd chosen. White roses for love, deep burgundy peonies for passion, a silent contrast that spoke of beauty hiding darker truths. The guests included our closest friends, her family, my colleagues, and unbeknownst to her, the woman whose life she'd shattered. Catherine, seated quietly near the front in a pale blue dress that matched the sadness in her eyes. I had arranged for her arrival under the guise of a distant cousin invited by Vanessa, my wife, so she wouldn't hesitate to come. Now Catherine sat across from her husband's empty seat, the pain in her posture a testament to the power of carefully orchestrated truth. My wife fluttered among the tables, radiant in a silk gown greeting each guest with practiced warmth. She floated up to me at one point, slid her hand into mine, and whispered how happy she was that I'd organized everything so perfectly. I smiled and kissed her cheek. "Anything for you," I replied, voice soft enough that no one except her could hear the hollow ring beneath it. She beamed, unaware that each compliment she paid me was the final reinforcement of her own confidence in our marriage's stability. Dinner progressed with impeccable timing. The first course arrived, a delicate butternut squash soup topped with creme fraiche and toasted pumpkin seeds. Between each course I circulated and chatted, raising a glass to someone's new job, someone else's baby announcement, weaving small compliments that kept the atmosphere buoyant. My wife told me later how proud she was of me, grateful for the life we'd built. The words cut like a blade, grateful, proud, because she no longer felt them for me. The main course was a perfectly roasted rack of lamb with rosemary juice and seasonal vegetables. The wine flowed freely, laughter grew louder, and the chatter deepened. It was exactly the scene I wanted, everyone leaning in trustingly, hanging on to every word spoken, completely unaware of the twist awaiting them. I observed my wife across the table as she sipped her wine, her cheeks flushed with pleasure. She caught my eye and offered me a playful smile, the kind she'd given me during the first years of our marriage, before routine dulled our spark. I raised my glass in return, my gaze steady. When the table cleared and dessert, lavender panna cotta with blackberry compote, was served, I tapped my spoon against my crystal glass and rose to my feet. The room hushed within seconds. My wife turned to me with surprised eyes. Catherine looked up from her plate, her expression unreadable. I lifted my glass, feeling the weight of every hidden file, every transferred asset, every confession I'd unearthed. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice calm but carrying across the room like an announcement. 12 years ago, I stood beside the woman I loved to make a promise, to cherish her, to protect her, and to build a life together. I paused, meeting my wife's gaze. She smiled blindly, thinking this was the beginning of a sentimental toast. These years have been filled with joy, triumphs, and challenges. We've celebrated milestones, supported each other's dreams, and created memories we'll carry forever. I nodded once, convincingly melancholic. Then I shifted my tone, letting the room feel the first chill. "But tonight I also want to talk about truth." A murmur rippled through the guests. I smiled faintly as some leaned forward, curious. Trust is the foundation of any relationship. When it's broken, everything built on top crumbles. I turned slightly so everyone could see Catherine, whose eyes shone with tears. "I've spent months gathering proof of betrayal, evidence that my wife, the woman I vowed to honor, has been involved in an emotional affair for over a year." Gasps echoed around the room. My wife's face went pale, her dream turning to ash in an instant. I lifted a small tablet I'd concealed at the podium and tapped it. The projector behind me flickered on, revealing the emails, photos, and messages I'd meticulously compiled. Conversations flowed across the screen, declarations of love, hotel receipts, moments shared in foreign cities. The evidence was undeniable. My wife stood, her chair scraping the floor, stammering apologies that fell flat amid the stunned silence. Catherine rose as well, tears streaming down her cheeks, her pain now part of the public spectacle. I turned back to the crowd, my voice steady. "In addition, I've transferred our joint assets into entities under my sole control to protect what remains of my financial security." A counselor from the divorce lawyer's office handed me a packet of papers, the filings ready for immediate service. I tapped another icon and the balance sheets appeared, showing empty accounts where once our savings lay. My wife's knees buckled and someone rushed to support her. I lifted my glass again, to truth, to justice, and to new beginnings. I drank deeply as the crowd erupted into whispers and stunned exclamations. My wife's tears fell unrestricted now, and I felt no pity, only the cold satisfaction of a long con brought to its epic conclusion. I sat down, the mask finally slipping to reveal the man I had always been, the architect of her ruin. I raise my glass again, hoping the gentle light from the chandelier will soften the blow, but by now the room is already taut with anticipation. To my beloved, I begin, my voice warm, the woman who welcomed me into her life 12 years ago and gave me everything I ever dreamed of. I hold her gaze and she flushes, expecting praise. Together, we've built a home filled with laughter, raised two wonderful children, and supported each other through every triumph and setback. My words hang in the air, lulling her and our guests into a false sense of security. I pause, letting the silence stretch. Then I lower my glass slowly, each movement deliberate. But beneath the surface of this perfect life lies a truth some of you may find shocking. The clink of crystal against crystal echoes as I set my glass on the table. I step forward and tap the microphone stand. I discovered this truth months ago and have spent every waking moment gathering evidence. Murmurs spread like wildfire as I lift a small remote and tap a button. The projector flickers and the first image appears. My wife's smile in a hotel lobby, her hand entwined with another man's. I switch slides, an email screenshot with the subject line, "You are my home," timestamped 2 nights ago, where she writes, "I can't wait to see you again. Every day without you feels hollow." A stunned hush falls. I raise my voice so everyone can hear, even those at the far end of the hall. This is not a fling or a mistake. This is a deep, emotional affair that's been going on for over a year. I watch her eyes fill with tears as she sees her own words magnified across the screen. Next, I cue the audio clips. Soft piano music fades out, replaced by her voice in a hushed tone. "I feel alive when I'm with you. With him, I'm more myself than I ever am with you." The man's voice follows, rich and intimate. "When I touch you, I belong to you completely." A collective gasp rises. The room tilts as our friends shift uncomfortably in their seats. The betrayal is no longer a private wound, it's a spectacle exposed for all to see. I lower the microphone and let the silence press against every ear. My wife's knees buckle beneath her and someone rushes to steady her. She cries out, but I wait until the last echo of her sobs fades. Then I place my hand on the podium and look over the crowd. I have transferred all our joint finances into entities under my sole control. Effective today, our shared accounts contain zero funds for your use. I gesture to the second screen showing bank statements. Balances at $1, names redacted, my name highlighted in plain text. You will need my authorization to access any of these assets, and I have already instructed our legal counsel to proceed with a fault-based divorce. The room erupts in whispered discussions. Some guests cover their eyes, others stare in stunned silence. I turn toward the front row where Catherine sits, her face pale and hollow. She meets my gaze with gratitude and anguish entwined. I motion for her to stand. She does, lifting herself to her full height despite tears streaking down her cheeks. The guests look at her uncertainly. "This is Catherine," I announce, "the wife of the man who betrayed me with my wife. She was kind enough to come tonight so you all could understand the full scope of their deception." I pause, letting the weight of those words settle. Catherine trembles but nods, her eyes searching the crowd for support. My wife's mouth falls open, unable to form words. I listen to the scrape of chairs and the rise of shocked voices as our friends realize the collateral damage of her betrayal. I take one last breath, feeling both relief and cold triumph wash over me. "I wish this night could have been different," I say, voice steady, "but truth is a powerful force and justice demands its due." I pick up my glass one final time. "To closure," I declare, "and to the beginnings we each deserve." I sip the drink, then turn on my heel and walk toward the exit, leaving a swirl of tears, confusion, and outrage in my wake. Behind me, the band stops playing. Plates clatter as guests begin to rise, voices overlapping in cries and exclamations. My wife stumbles to her feet, shouting my name, but I keep walking until I'm through the double doors into the cool night air. I pause under the portico, watching the lights spill out behind me onto the driveway. My heart feels hollow yet vast, as though I've just freed myself from a cage. The long con is complete, the toast of ruin delivered, and I step into the darkness ready to rebuild from the ashes.